non-violence is a very tall demand that he makes on us. Is there a way that children might become less fearful than we are at our ages, young or old as we are today? Is there a diagnosis and way to the future that Gandhi offers? Well, he did offer. He was a teacher most of his life. He taught his own children in those farms that he set up in South Africa. But later on also, wherever there were children, Gandhi was ready to teach them how to do good arithmetic or learn alphabet and so on. But his proposal for education came only towards the last period of his life, 1937. That's when Gandhi formally proposed what he called Nai Talim, a new education. Basic education is popular, is known by this popular title. It's associated with Gandhi and many Gandhians since then, although it's no more an important policy in any country, including India or in any state of India. But we have exponents and stories of those who practiced the Nai Talim of Gandhi, from whom we can learn something, whether it offers us a way to peace in this world, in a few generations, if not in one generation, brought up with this new doctrine of education that Gandhi had offered. The most interesting among these practitioners, who was also a kind of a theory builder as a teacher. Teachers mostly don't like to be told to build a theory. But Devi Prasad, who worked with both Gandhi and Tagore, offers us that kind of theorization in his book, Art, the Basis of Education. Devi Prasad worked in Shanti Niketan as well as in Sevagram and remained a peace warrior throughout his life. He lived in London for 12 years, during which he was the Secretary General of the War Resisters International. He was also a great potter, a great painter. He had come under the influence of Bernard Leach and the Cornwall School of Functional Heritage Pottery. Devi Prasad writes in his book that there is something that we can imagine doing when children are very small. And we notice their craving for symmetry. This is the phrase Devi uses in one of his writings about this matter. Their craving for symmetry. What can provide some satisfaction to that craving, which is very different from their craving for milk or sugar or craving for comfort? His answer is art. Art provides a complete framework for little children's education. It's actually a doctrine that is totally against current educational theories, which are determined to teach skills which make you marketable and job ready when you have finished university. And therefore there is very little room for art or for funding art in primary schools or in secondary schools and so on. This may be the wrong moment to talk about this. And since we have liberated ourselves this afternoon from the idea of seeking relevance in either Gandhi or his ideas, we are free. We are free to imagine a future. And if that future is going to be any better than where we are today in the world, then Devi Prasad does offer us something. He did not believe in the distinction between crafts and arts. And that is why he is perhaps the most important interpreter of Gandhi's basic education idea. Because in Gandhi's own words, good education during the early years can only be craft-centric. Which craft shall we learn? It can be any craft. It can be weaving, it can be carpentry, it can be sculpture or whatever. It creates self-awareness because you learn from the wood that you are trying to cut. David Hosbrook thought that way and taught carpentry as his chosen means of teaching little children. Weaving, knitting, these are all crafts that absorb the mind fully. And you don't isolate yourself while you are knitting or while you are weaving, the way you isolate yourself in your grand encounter with the world through your smartphone, where you are flicking one after the other side. No. The craft keeps you. It's uncanny there. The moment one mentions the smartphone, it conveys to us its ubiquitous universal presence. And therefore, it's very important for us to make our minds clear as to how crafts differ from currently available experiences of distraction. Crafts are no distraction. Artists always knew it, but somehow in theories of education we believe that crafts distract the child's mind into a moment of peace. No, that's not Devi Prasad's way of thinking. He thought that crafts create self-discipline. They also impose on the little child's mind an aesthetic discipline which will stay with the child throughout his or her life. An aesthetic discipline is something that grows from within and makes you a person who is not pursuing art or craft for taste or sophistication, but simply for peace of one's mind. And that idea of Nai Taaleem or new education has always received criticism from rationalist modern thinkers of both education and Gandhian thought. That this was a good idea for pre-industrial India, but it's no more relevant. It's certainly no more relevant for the heavily industrialized world of Europe or North America and so on. Its time seems to have gone. Marjorie Sykes, who was an associate of Gandhi and who was sent on various missions by Gandhi throughout her life, was also a teacher. She taught at Sevagram and was the headmistress of the Sevagram school which Gandhi had set up. Later in life, she wrote several books, including her most famous academic book, you might say, Quakers, A History of Quakers. She also wrote a small book on the story of Nai Taaleem, the story of this new education of Gandhi. It describes how it was practiced in his time, how it was practiced in some schools after Gandhi was no more, and how a handful of schools remained committed to it even after it was dropped from state policy. And then towards the end of the book, Marjorie Sykes says, well, today perhaps we are right in thinking that Nai Taaleem or new education is over. And then she writes those prophetic last words of her book. To the extent it was true, its time will come. Thank you.
We have opened the questions, answers. The briefer you are, the larger the number of questions you can get in. So, Kumar will take pictures and as it was made a recording of the answer. So, who would like to start off with questions? Difference between fiction and truth? Go ahead.
On the subject of education, with each era, each generation, they keep bringing new things, which one work, they still don't know, quite frankly. It's they try to improve and then they go back to the old system, and continues like that. Now, the era we live in at the moment, both parents have to work, make ends meet, so the children are put in nursery at a very early age, and then preschool, and then primary school, and so on and so forth. So they have learned nothing from their parents or the mother who educates the child to begin with, and they're not using their own brain or what they can do. I was brought up in a village, and our house was 2 miles from the jungle. We had no toys, we were very poor, so we had to use our imagination for everything we did, from playing drawing boxes on the ground, and hopscotch and all the games, and making our own toys. And sometimes guidance from our parents or the elders, we were left to our own devices. And that's taken away from children totally now, completely. I did an art foundation course, and it was so structured. They won't allow me to use the colors I wanted to use or what I wanted to draw, and it's also everybody else's ideas you have to get your education from, not your own. And Osho did not go to school until he was 9 years old. And he was just left to roam around and notice nature and use his own mind. But we don't have that today. And is it a plus to have all this technology and everybody putting their ideas, or let a child think for themselves?
Well, I'm glad that there is no question.
No, let's have a couple of more questions.
Idea, what you're describing is of course. Sure.
Give you some time. Think and to eat.
Okay.
There are 2 more questions.
Oh, okay.
We can have all 3 questions.
Sure.
Go ahead.
What we see in the world today is violence. Are we going to learn that we should probably, all the democratic citizens of the world are doing something and remove the politicians who are responsible, although we elect them, they do not look after people if we want to change. How Gandhi works today?
Okay. Question behind you.
Yeah, my question is really that as Gandhi was developing his own Nai Talim, how much was he informed by, or he informed some of the other thoughts or practices that came through, particularly J. Krishnamurti and also Montessori? And we do see Montessori and Krishnamurti schools present today, but how much did they inform each other and learn from each other, or what influence did they have on each other?
How Gandhi works today is a tempting question, but a question that seriously distracts us. Gandhi is no mechanism. He can't be using the phrase that we these days use commonly, how to fix that problem, or how to fix this war, or achieve ceasefire somewhere. If Gandhi is offering us something, it is definitely a slow remedy. It's not a quick remedy. In fact, if it were a quick sort of remedy, then it won't be Gandhi. Because the man has a vision, a proposal which requires every individual to feel involved, responsible, and not simply as a member of the crowd, but in his or her own world. That's really the way in which his book, Gandhi's book, distinguishes between Swaraj and freedom. freedom is from somebody, whereas Swaraj is the idea of ruling one's own self, so that no other ruler is required to rule me. And that doctrine is not something that we can use in answer to a question that, can you work today? Well, it's a long today be required in order to be able to put Gandhi to work. It requires an enormous effort, there is no question. Otherwise we will be betraying both Gandhi and the idea of Gandhi. Relation between Montessori and Gandhian educational thinking was well understood and explained by a Gujarati educationist of the 1930s and 40s, Gijubhai, who wrote very extensively on exactly this theme, because he was greatly impressed by Montessori. And he, at his school in Dakshinamurti in Gujarat, he practiced Montessorian ideas with Gandhi's emphasis on using local conditions and resources instead of an elaborate equipment, which is very expensive if you are a proper Montessorian. So, and the ideas of Krishnamurti, of course, also many of these ideas, you can say, gel with several experiences of Gandhi himself as a teacher, and also with ideas that we derive from him. But the idea of God is a very significant issue when we are working with Gandhi. And it's not something that can be taught as such. In Krishnamurti's context, as we know, this is also difficult to sustain. In fact, there's a long dialogue with Krishnamurti on record, where he speaks about the Buddha as a philosopher, as a guide, with whom he has many similarities, but from whom he differs. As far as other kinds of religions are concerned, Krishnamurti has very little to say about them, or little to offer us as to what they might mean for education. In that sense, he is definitely a different kind of modern thinker. Extremely inspiring, and in his schools you can see how much his own idea of peace works in classrooms, in gardens, in various other locations in his school. But the Gandhi idea of using the school as a community which practices on the basis of children's active experience of learning a craft and being close to nature. And some of these absolutely basic ideas that Devi Prasad works on go back to this question as to how should a human being achieve peace to begin with, not as an outcome of educational experience, but something that you start with. And Montessori perhaps is the best reminder in the whole of modern library of educational thought, that babies are born in peace and require a peaceful atmosphere when they are born and as they grow older. She made the world aware of the secret of childhood, as her famous book is called. And that book also leaves you in no doubt that Montessori is talking about the child as a manifestation of something higher. We are not in a generation when we like to think that children are manifestations of God, something that Gijubhai could openly say in the 40s. This notion that there is something divine about the little child comes very close to Gandhi's ideas about the goal of mitigating and removing all fear so that truth can become the goal of life. Thank you.
Another question there. Who was asking?
Me. Question there? Over here.
As you mentioned a couple oftentimes that, or this question, is fiction incompatible with truth? And we've used the word truth a lot. How would Gandhi understand truth?
The best I can recommend for this question is Erik Erikson's book called Gandhi's Truth.
Probably a good start.
As a teacher, I can't avoid suggesting books, which I've done all my life. It's always more convenient to suggest a good book so that the question is at least postponed. It takes time. Especially to read Erikson, it takes time. He starts off with interviewing people who became Gandhi's followers in the first week of their lives in Ahmedabad. And then he draws from their experiences with Gandhi to spin a very, very complex, large, psychoanalytic story of Gandhi. When you finish the book, you wonder, is the title appropriate? Gandhi's Truth. What was it? But then if you reflect on some of the interviews that he took with people who became Gandhi's lifelong disciples, after meeting him once or twice, you realize what he's talking about, both in Gandhi's case and in the case of people like Marjorie Sykes, who came from distant lands and just committed themselves to him. Miraben and so on. There are so many examples like that. And the answer is that Gandhi's truth consists of finding what you have been equipped by the higher powers to do best. If you can find what you are here in this world to do best, then that's your truth. Follow it. We can call it identity, we can call it self-identity, or we can call it simply self. If you find yourself, if you have found yourself, then you have found your truth. And if you follow your truth without fear, or without sense of insecurity, how much will I earn if I become simply an embroiderer, then you deviate from that self, or you begin to get distracted. But Gandhi's truth, according to Erikson at least, is this idea that you are true to yourself. It's a kind of a long, elaborate way of saying that we are talking about the integrated person whose self guides all the various actions in which he or she participates. And that's how Erikson interprets Gandhi himself. That when he found what he was born for, nothing could stop him anymore. That moment occurred perhaps in South Africa. Perhaps seeds of that moment had already been sown during his life in London for 3 years, where he practiced law before being called to South Africa by somebody else. There are several moments in Gandhi's life where you feel that there was something happening that he took to heart, but the ultimate moment is believed to have occurred in South Africa, in that train journey, when he suffered that very dramatic experience of racist discrimination. And the anger born out of that was transformed into energy that sustained him throughout his life, to his end. That is Erikson's way of thinking about the truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask?
Go on.
Thank you, Professor. Really enlightening talk. I know it takes a great deal of courage for Swaraj, and we all